you know, all right, I'm gonna try not to waste too much time on this, but a quick intro. I recently, literally just a couple of weeks ago, built a new computer, and I based that on a Ryzen 9 3900X. I was originally actually planning on making a kind of a tutorial video on building a PC, and I even started recording it, and I even recorded probably 30 to 40 minutes of footage. But there are a couple of reasons why that video never came out. To be honest, I just never finished it, and I kind of gave up and stopped doing it. Just to explain real quick, there are a couple of reasons. One, my phone that I use to record my videos actually kind of let me down for the first time. Wasn't really the phone's fault. I just didn't think that to charge it pretty much all day, and I had a long day. I had to drive for 2 hours to another state, to Micro Center to pick up all my PC parts, and then of course 2 hour drive back. And this whole time I just didn't charge my phone, and when I started recording in the evening, the phone died in the middle of recording, and I couldn't just wait for it to recharge to continue my build. It was already past 11 p.m. and I just wanted to keep going. And at the same time, just trying to make a video while building a PC was a little bit too distracting to me. Talking to the camera and explaining what I'm doing. I really just wanted to build a PC right and not mess anything up. It wasn't my first time doing it, so I know what I'm doing. But I just decided to stop recording and just build a PC. And I don't need a video for that. However, today I got something new for it, and I want to share this. So, real quick, Ryzen 9 3900X is a very, very powerful processor. This is actually a Zen 2 generation, and someone might ask, hey, didn't you just say you bought this 2 weeks ago? Like in October? Yeah, it was October 1st. So the same month that AMD was introducing their new Zen 3, like, why would you do that? Well, I'll tell you why. It's simple, because you can get a better deal on it. So this was $400 at Micro Center. I think it's a very good price for a 12-core, 24-thread PCIe 4 ready processor. Third generation Ryzen CPU. Feel like it's a good deal. Now, I could wait for new ones, and the new ones are coming out really soon in just another couple of weeks, but the price for a similar processor, which would be 5900X, based on Zen 3, yes, of course it's more powerful, of course it's going to be faster, probably 15 to 20% better performance than this guy here, but the price, I think it's like $550, maybe even more. And a lot of times at launch, it's hard to find them at that retail suggested price, so people end up paying even more than that. So if it's $150 more for 15% increased performance, it's just not very cost effective, really. Like, you're paying 40% more for something to get 15% more out of it. I could go for 5800X, and that would be $450, but that's an 8-core, 16-thread processor, and I think this Ryzen 9 3900X is still a more powerful overall processor. However, it's kind of warm, and it runs a little bit on the hotter side. For me, I'm seeing average temps at around 55 to 60 Celsius. So sometimes it dips down to maybe 49, sometimes it goes to like 67. So let's just say 55 to 60 is my average. It's not an idle temperature. I measure it while I'm doing my regular work on the computer. So for me, it'll be a couple of games open, a Chrome window open with probably 20 to 30 tabs. I'll have YouTube playing, or maybe a VLC player playing at the same time, maybe a couple of hardware monitoring apps running. And with all that, just multitasking on 3 separate screens, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing about 55 to 60 on average Celsius from this CPU, and the fan running at around 70%. Temperature is not too crazy. It's still within its limits. So it's a little bit on the hotter side, but it's you can use it at that. It's fine. It's safe. However, what was a problem to me is the fan noise from the included stock fan, which is the Wraith Prism that comes with the processor. It's a very nice fan. I really like the look of it. I like the RGB lights on it. I think it fits in well with my system and everything. But the fan noise, after a few days of use, it just got too annoying to me, and I decided it's time to upgrade to something a little bit different. Hopefully, a little bit quieter. That's gonna lower the temperature at least a little bit. But again, I'm not too worried about temperature. I'm mostly worried about the acoustics and how much noise I get while using my computer. Mostly, not only because the fan is loud, because it's a smaller fan, um, but one thing I noticed that's kind of weird about Ryzen chips is their temperature doesn't rise or fall gradually. It seems to fluctuate by 10 to 20 degrees like every few seconds. So when I'm talking about 55, then it'll jump to 67, then it'll drop to 49, then it'll go to like 58, then to 51, then to 64. And it just does this constantly every few seconds, seems like. And as a result, the fan that is cooling it keeps pulling up or turning itself down every few seconds too. So it's just this constant change in frequency that continues, to be noticeable. If it was just a steady hum of the fan, I would probably forget about it, very quickly. I'd probably not even worry about it. But it's just going up and down, louder, quieter, different frequencies, and it keeps doing it all day long. And I spend at least 10 hours a day in front of my computer because that's where I work, and that's where I hang out after work. So probably more than 10 hours, probably 12 to 13 hours. Basically, Monday to Friday, I'm in front of that computer all day long. So to fix that, I decided I'm going to try this MSI cooler. CORELIQUID 240R liquid cooling from MSI. So this is kind of a newer product. I see that it just came out, I believe, in April of 2020. This is two RGB fans, 120 millimeters each, and there's some RGBs on the pump, or not a pump. Let me correct myself. The CPU block, because unlike most of the other coolers, this is not the only one, but unlike most of other coolers in the market, they have their pump built into radiator instead of the CPU block. And I don't know if it makes any difference as far as the noise levels, but they said what it does, it kind of gives you a little bit better durability, since the pump is removed from the source of the heat, so it doesn't get affected by the heat as much, and also it gives you better water flow. I think that's about it, or maybe they just wanted to be different. So a couple of smaller benefits, probably not a huge difference, but they said, or not said, but the pump is in the radiator, so this is how they try to differentiate themselves. Oh, it also makes your CPU block smaller. So most of the other ones are larger, taller, maybe wider, because they have this additional hardware in them. But here they removed it, they put it in the radiator, making your CPU block a little bit smaller. I'm gonna go ahead and start opening it and continue to share my thoughts. So I was doing some research on the different coolers for a few days, and I considered some from Cooler Master, Corsair, and of course the MSI, and whatever else was available. I looked at them too. There's tons and tons of different brands that I had never heard of, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's some really good deals on Amazon, for example, on some maybe Chinese brands coolers. What I learned about them is that most of them are actually made by the same company. So it sounds like the technology that is used in these pumps is patented by one or two companies there. So everyone is really using the same design, and everyone is using the same tech in them, because there's just somebody owns the patents for it. So all the manufacturers paying royalties to those couple of companies, and they just all make very similar systems. The things that are different are fans. So the fans and the quality of the RGB and the quality of the fan itself is something that is going to be different from manufacturer to manufacturer. But another thing too that they probably not gonna notice, but you know me, I'm gonna check. So Microstar International, that's an MSI brand, but this part is not. I'm sure it's not made by MSI. I'm sure they just license it from somebody and just pay somebody to make a cooler for them, to put their logo on it and package it as MSI and sell it. It has very good reviews though, so people seem to like it, and I felt good about buying it. My motherboard is also MSI, and I'm just hoping that these two components will work well together for another reason I'm going to explain in a moment here. For example, Corsair, it appears that they use their own kind of proprietary looking fan connectors. So when I was looking at a cooler, one of the things that was important to me is I don't want to add another RGB controller to my system. There's already one in there. There's already a mayhem of cables, the chaos. When you go to RGB, you're going to very quickly realize that your cable management difficulty just quadrupled, because you don't only have your components cables, now you have all these thin RGB cables. They go all over. They go to the front, to the back, to the top, to the bottom. So there's a web of cables in the back of your system, and I didn't want to add more to that already. Like any of them will, and this will too. As I understand it, this cooler here uses just your regular cables, the same ones that most fans will use, or your OEM cooler here. They just plug into your motherboard, and that's kind of what I want. My motherboard has a couple of extra RGB headers available, and so I want to use them. I don't want to use an additional controller. I just want to use the RGB headers that is already built into my motherboard and control it with MSI software that I already used to control a couple of other RGBs on the motherboard and on the case. So one of the questions I had that was kind of hard to find a direct answer to is, can I control my fans colors and my CPU block color independently? From a lot of reviews, people said like, no, it's all one color. From the pictures, all the promotional materials, it looks like it's just one color. And if you look at the installation videos, you'll see people just kind of daisy chain them all together, your CPU block, and then to your coolers, and then to the RGB header, and yeah, that will give you one color. Not just one color RGB. I mean, it can change colors. It can have all the different effects, but I mean the same color between your fans and your CPU block. And that's something that I would like to be able to set different colors to, just to match it better with other components in the system. So after doing some research, I noticed that during the installation, people connect them together, like all this madness with cables. Yes, they daisy chain them together like that, but it doesn't look like you have to. I mean, it actually kind of looks like you can plug in your CPU block into one header on the motherboard and just daisy chain the two fans together and connect them into another header on the motherboard. So that should give you two separate RGB zones that you can then control from the software. I'm gonna test this, and I'm gonna show you at the end of the video some footage if it worked or not. I don't know if there's gonna be voice over those, but I'll definitely record it. And if I find some complications or anything worth discussing, I'll record an update. So for now, I just want to unbox it and do a quick overview of components. The fans look actually pretty nice. I like the design and blades. They're supposed to be nice and quiet. A lot of people, a lot of reviews said that this is one of the quieter coolers in the market. Not the quietest, but one of the quieter ones. So let's see what we have for connections here. This is your actual fan power connector, and here's your RGB connector. It looks like you have one that you can plug into your standard RGB port here, and this one here goes either to a header on the motherboard or an RGB controller. Let's take a look at the second one. Is it the same? It's exactly the same. So the way it'll work, you would daisy chain two fans together like this, like that, and then you would use one of the available connectors, like this one here, to connect it to your RGB controller or a header on the motherboard. And of course, your fans will connect to, there's a splitter here for the fans, and the same way your fans connect to the appropriate header on the motherboard. So that gives you one lightning zone. Now let's take a look at the pump and the CPU block. Now, quick confession. This is going to be my first all-in-one liquid cooler. Sorry, not air cooler, but I guess it does both. It uses air and liquid. I always used air coolers before, not stock, but my last aftermarket air cooler just didn't fit right on the Ryzen AM4 socket. So this time, yeah, I decided to go with one of the liquid coolers, all-in-ones, to make it easy. And I have very little experience with them. I know, understand how they work. I just don't have too much personal experience. So here in the block, we have just your RGB cables, and it's the same exact deal. You have one that plugs into the header or a controller, and this one you can use to plug in, to daisy chain it with your fans. So if I did that, I would have the same color on all of them because they would go from the same header. However, what I'm going to try to do is I'm just going to plug in this to one header on the motherboard and plug those two into another header on the motherboard and see if I can just see them separately in software and control them that way. So CPU block is really nice looking. I don't mind this Dragon MSI logo, and I already have an MSI motherboard, so there's a radio logo like this right there, right next to it. Again, we'll see that in a little bit. And so it'll match. This also rotates, which is kind of cool. So there's another benefit. I guess there's not much going on in this top part because the pump is not here. The pump is in the radiator. So this is really just your lights and just for the look. So you can move it around. You can rotate it. You can rotate some more. So you can make sure it's facing the appropriate, facing the right direction, no matter how you want to install it, like no matter where you want your tubes to be. If you want them to be at the top, right, bottom, or left side, you can always rotate the logo to always face the right direction. Pretty cool, because I have no idea how I'm going to install them yet. I guess it's going to depend on how the socket installs, because I think with Intel you can put it really any way you want, but with AM4 for AMD processors, it looks like we might be limited to just two orientations because of how the socket is designed. And here's the radiator itself. So the pump is right in there. Usually they have a pump built into the CPU block. MSI moved it here, so it made this part much lighter and smaller and just sleek looking. So here we only have your fan connector, and this will go to either optional or fan header on the motherboard. My motherboard actually, sorry, not fan, pump. My motherboard actually has a header labeled pump, so that's where the pump cable is going. And lastly, for this part, the accessories they come with it. We have some mounting screws. That's what you're gonna use to attach, to attach your fans to the radiator, to the case. We have a couple of brackets. So this is for Intel. Unfortunately, no Intel for me anymore. A little bit of thermal paste. I'm not using that. I'm gonna use my own. And here's that fan splitter. Let me see how does it. Yeah, so you're gonna use this for your fans. You're gonna connect both fan ends into this male ends on the splitter, and this will go into a header on your motherboard. So this is actually gonna connect to your CPU fan header. So your system can control the speed of the fans based on the temperature of your CPU and load. more mounting screws for different types of sockets. For example, there's LGA 2011, and I believe this doesn't say what. This is just universal. Like they're pieces that I'm going to use for mine. And probably open it up. Because this here is your AMD adapter, and it's going to use the AMD mounting system that is already on the motherboard by putting those pieces there and screwing it together, and then another one on the other side. So the way the motherboard is situated, you have the plastic mounting brackets at the top or the bottom of the socket, and that means that this can only go either this orientation or this orientation. And by looking at the block here, so this will need to be installed going like this, just like that. Very easy, slides right in. But what this means, however, then I can only put it with cables on the right side or on the left side, but I can't install it with cables at the top, or not cables, tubes, I'm sorry, or at the bottom. And originally I would love to have them kind of going from the bottom, although it's awkward. It doesn't want to twist that way. You can twist them, but maybe it's a good thing. So if they're on the side here, looks like I'm going to be able just to have them going just like this. And the fence, I'm not 100% sure yet if they're going to be on the outside like this, or if I'm going to put them on the inside like so. I don't really want too much of the RGB light from this fence. That's another reason why I want them separately from the block, because I do want the light on the block. I don't know how much light I want from the fence, maybe not at all. So I'm going to try to hide them inside and see how it works, if it's kind of between the case and the radiator. And it's also going to be cool to have the radiator exposed, I think, to me anyway. But if that doesn't work very well for some reason, then just move them back up here and I'll just have them on the front. Okay, so my first impression, to be honest, I'm not 100% impressed. I don't know if you can hear, but there's this constant whining sound. And I'm sure it's coming from the fan, from the pump. Now, I know there are cables all over. I haven't been cable managing yet, just still in the middle of the setup. So the lights look nice. A little bit hard to tell in the video, but they're very bright, very clear. Right now I have fans kind of facing inside the case, but in my limited testing so far, to be honest, just haven't been really all that impressed. Now it does keep the temperature lower. I think I'm doing my normal use case. I'm looking at about 47, 48 degrees instead of 55 to 60. So it lowered it by, say, 7 to 10 degrees on average. And at full load, it's actually a little bit more impressive. It's keeping around 68, 69, maybe 70, versus before with the stock fan, you could get to 80 to 82 degrees. So again, 10 to 12 degrees lower, I would say, on average at full 100% CPU load. But it's a little bit noisier than I expected. All the reviews and feedback kind of said that it was very quiet, all-in-one cooler, but for some reason it's not the experience that I'm having. So there's like two. There's hear that whine, kind of comes and goes, and also just in general. Just this kind of operating noise. So I don't know. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna move the radiator to the top and see if it makes any difference. Maybe just by having the pump and in the horizontal position instead of vertical, maybe it'll work better. So let's give it a try. Okay, so what I decided to do is actually, instead of going through trouble and mounting all to the top here, I figured I'll just hold it and see what it does. And having it horizontally like this, yeah, that weird obnoxious whine is definitely kind of gone. I can still hear some, but I have to be very close to it to try to hear it. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if I want to have it mounted to the top. I mean, there's not that much room here, and it'll close it'll cover half of my system if I was to do that. It makes it a bit claustrophobic in there. But I mean, I could. The tubing is weird now. It's gonna be a whole project I'll have to redo. Probably move the tubes to the right side if I was to do that. But what if, let's see, what if I move it back to the position it was in? Why was it doing that? I don't hear it anymore. Was that because it was attached to the case? Yeah. Yeah, putting it just next to metal. Some of the noise comes back, so not ideal. By the way, you can totally set the lights on the fence and lights on the CPU block to two different RGB zones, just like I expected. That's what I did. And control them from MSI software. So then I have a decision to make here. How much do I really want this? It still gets kind of noisy, but the temperatures are definitely much better. Just have to figure out where I could mount this thing, really. I could go right here. It's not bad because the right fan would grab some of the cooler air that didn't circle through the system yet. Alright, well, let me try something and we'll check back in a sec. Okay, here we have it. Have it mounted to the top. Just in a temporary location. Just see what's happening. And it's really faint, kind of hard to hear. But unfortunately, sometimes there is a hit, sometimes there are misses. I think this one might be a miss for me. I think I might have to go back to the store. I can't deal with this whine. My last cooler, yes, it gets a little bit noisy, but at least it sounds like, I don't know, jet engines pulling up. This sounds like a whale slowly dying somewhere in the distance, just like whining and really weird. Plus at full load, fans do get pretty loud too. And so with that said, here it all is. Like I was just saying, sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss. And guess why it's not in my system anymore? And that's why it's all messy here on this dissecting table. It's going back to Best Buy. So I went all over the place with my emotions with this, from being excited, optimistic, to then sort of underwhelmed but okay to straight up disappointed and really annoyed. Couple of things that I learned here. And I'm just gonna, I guess, file this under lessons learned. Now, this is just one example. Like I mentioned, I don't have any experience with, well, now I do, but I didn't have any experience prior to this with all-in-one liquid coolers. And reading the reviews on this particular model, everyone keeps saying that it's like really quiet. And just makes me wonder, is it just, is it quiet by all-in-one liquid cooler standards, or did I get, a defective equipment? Because I can definitely hear the pump. I think it's really freaking loud. And the frequency of it just gave me a headache, I think. I mean, I got a headache by sitting there, but it's actually even worse than listening to the constantly spooling jet engine of a Ryzen stock cooler. So maybe it's normal. I mean, there's a pump in there. I have a couple of fish tanks, and they have filters, they have pumps, and those things are pretty loud too. Always noticeable. So maybe it is normal for this type of cooler, but yeah, that's still not what I want. So there might be a video coming up soon if I decide to try a larger air cooler. Kind of a reason why I always stuck with those. If you buy a good brand, it will be near silent, and it will do a good job. So personally, for me, the lesson learned here is that I'm just going to stick with air, and I'm not going to try, I don't think I'm even going to try another water cooler. Maybe it's just a bad experience, but that's just how it goes. I don't have time and money to keep going back and forth to stores to buy them and try them, return them. I don't really want to do that too. So that's okay. It happens. It's not always perfect. Will I recommend this? I think you should still try it if you get a chance. If you're looking at this and considering it, I think you should still give it a try. So the LEDs are very bright. You can, in fact, separate your fans and your CPU block into two separate LED zones. That was actually really easy to do. Just plug them into two different RGB headers. So that's a plus. It does cool. It does cool your system pretty effectively. It gave me about 10 to 12 degrees lower temperatures. Even under load, I just tested it with a stock cooler. I would get to 80 to 82, maybe even 83 degrees Celsius. With this one here, it always remained around 70, 71, 72 max, but usually it would just drop back down to 70 or 69. So we're looking at 10 to 12 degrees decrease in temperature all across the board, from idle to normal use to load. And that's, it's a pretty good result. In fact, if you look into overclock, that might make a pretty big difference on what kind of overclock you can get out of your system. So with that in mind, yeah, I think you should still try it if you get a chance to. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. It works well. It's just, for me, it might be me. It might be oversensitive to certain frequencies. The sound that it made, it wasn't too loud or obnoxious by any means, but it was just loud and annoying enough to convince me that I don't even need to test it for more than just a few hours that I had it for. I'm just not going to be able to live with it. And that's why it's going back. So I'm just going to pack it back in nicely and take it right back to the store and keep trying something else. That's what's so amazing about technology nowadays. We have plenty of options, so there's no need to stress. Something didn't work out, back it goes. We'll try something else.